Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of Entitled People. Hope you're all doing well, and let's get right into it. Don't care about people calling me on your old number? I'll sort it. I had just moved to Australia and gotten a new phone, but as it turns out, my number was someone else's old number. Every other week, I'd get calls by a tradie who wanted to know why I wasn't on site, mate, or what I wanted done with building project ABC. Every time, I explained at length that they got the wrong number, and quite often, folks on the other end were absolutely rude, or thought that I was taking the piss and insist I answer their questions, or show up on site now. I was over it, so I googled my own number and did some digging, and eventually found the guy who had my number before, then his new number, and then I called him. I politely explained my dilemma, pointed out that there were two websites still having his old, my now new, number, and if he could please change this and let his contacts know about his new number, and to delete the old one as it was getting quite tedious for me. By that time, I had used my number for work, visa applications, and landlords and friends, and changing it would have been a huge pain. I explained all of that. Well, of course, he was just as pleasant as most of his contacts, and told me something along the lines of, "I don't give a f***, mate. That's not my f***ing problem. Get f***ed. Sort your own shit out, mate." Well, the universe provides, and so I got a great opportunity to do just that only a few weeks later. I received a call in the early hours of one morning by another disgruntled guy telling me he was early, and demanding to know where I wanted the sand put down and how to get in. I asked what sand, and was told he had a full truckload of sand, as ordered, and no one was on site and it was all fenced off. Very briefly did I think about launching into my explanation, but I was tired and over it, and then realized the opportunity provided. I snapped back at him with no uncertainty. "Mate, it's all good. Dump it all right in the driveway, front of the fence. We'll sort it out when we get there." The guy said, "You sure, mate? It's a lot of sand." "Absolutely sure, mate. Thanks a lot," I said. "All right then, boss," and hangs up. Well, I go back to bed, snoozing for another hour with a big smile, until my phone rings again, and I see it's old mate with his new number who I had saved when I called him a few weeks ago. I pick up rather chipper, and he doesn't waste any time launching into a series of swear words, and how he has no access to the site, and that he has to move a literal ton of sand by hand, and whether or not I told the sand guy to dump it all there. I replied, "You told me to sort this out myself. This is me sorting this out. You can remove the numbers and let your contacts know. Or not. Totally up to you, mate." He was fuming, called me a few more choice words, promising to find me and a lot more before we ended the conversation. However, the numbers disappeared from the internet really quickly after that, and I never got another call again. I still have my number, and every time I see a truck with sand, I chuckle to myself, thinking of this guy moving a ton of sand by hand, and losing a fair few hours of labor just because he was a douchebag, and couldn't be bothered sending a few texts. Karen told me to hang up, so I did. So I work for a large electronics company doing sales over the phone. We get a lot of calls daily and take credit card details to place orders, as well as place finance orders. Since fraud is such a big deal with our company, we're taught that only the account holder for the credit card or finance account can place an order. Cue Karen calling to place an order for finance. We go through everything, get her name, address, number, and payment details. Just before I place the order, she goes, "Oh, the card's in my dad's name, that's fine, right?" I tell her no, her dad needs to place the order as he's the account holder. Cue her arguing for about 5 minutes, how she's his daughter and I need to finalize this order now. I tell her I'm sorry, but I can't do that. As I've mentioned, the account holder needs to place the order. She started cussing me out, calls me a stupid f***ing idiot, and that I know nothing, and demands I place the order. I've had enough at this point, since she started swearing and getting aggressive. I said, "I'm sorry, but if you continue to speak to me in such a manner, I will terminate this call." Customer says, "Well, terminate it then." So I did, with the, "Okay then, thank you for calling, have a nice day." I heard her go, "No, wait," as I hung up on her. God, that felt good. So this happened years ago when my son was 12. He is now 24, and we had gone on vacation to Florida. I do not have many Karen stories, but this is definitely one that sticks out in my mind. My sister, who lived in Florida with her then fiance, now husband, decided that she wanted to surprise my son with a trip to Disney World for his 13th birthday. but in order to get the kid discount, she would need to take him before his actual birthday. No problem. His birthday was towards the tail end of summer vacation, so she arranged it for a couple of weeks prior. She and her fiancé even paid for me to go with them, and for all of us to stay in a hotel on Disney property, without any of us letting my son know that this would be happening. But that is a funny and sweet story in and of itself. So he had a nice surprise. We were there for about a week before we had to fly back to the Midwest. Again, no problem. Now, the thing you need to know is that while I was not actively disabled at the time, I was already handicapped, to the point that I was already using 2 canes to walk when I was having bad days, and vacations are rough on me. Just traveling was rough. So we had arranged for me to be taken to and from the planes via an airport wheelchair, including when we had to transfer planes with the help of the airport staff. This is because I couldn't walk long distances or stand for extended periods of time. Another thing to note for those who don't know is that handicapped people are almost always the first ones to be allowed to board a plane, no matter where they are seated. This way we are out of everyone else's way and we do not get tripped or injured while trying to deal with the crowds. The planes taken for a short 2 to 3 hour flight, the whole flying time was around 3 or 4 hours, but divided by 2 different plane trips, due to the transfer, are generally smaller than those for longer flights. And since my son was flying with me and underage, he of course boarded with me. So we get to the airport in Orlando, say goodbye to my sister and fiancé, and get escorted to our gate to await boarding. It is late morning, around 10 or 11 a.m. I notice a short while later that there is another woman who was brought over in a wheelchair, also waiting for the plane. She seemed fine for the most part, but then so do I most of the time. No big deal. Many handicaps and disabilities are invisible, and this woman's health issues are not my business. But I did feel sympathy for her because she was not much older than I, and I was in my mid-30s, so totally understood. Time comes to board and they take my son and I first, since we were there first, and this other woman second. Turns out that this woman is seated in the same row as my son and I, but just across the aisle. The attendants got her in her seat and then left to start with the normal boarding. My son and I settle down. Suddenly, I hear the lady calling out, "Excuse me." I turn and she is talking to my son and I. She is having obvious trouble with her seatbelt, and she is obviously not as physically adept as I thought she had been when I first saw her. I, being nice as I tend to try to be, got up and went over to help her. And that is when I noticed she was not only having more physical issues than I thought before, but her speech had become slurred, her eyes glazed over, and she was not nearly as lucid as she had been before. My first thought was that she was having a stroke. My mom had always told me about her mom's stroke, and it was similar to this. So I started to ask if I should go get help. And she said, "No, I don't want the pilot or attendant. I just need help with my seatbelt." By this point, my son, bless him, was also concerned about this woman's well-being. And since my folks also had health issues, he knew when to listen and not listen to someone who was claiming they didn't need help. Without me having to do anything more than glance his way in concern, he rushed to get the pilot. They had only barely started boarding people at this time, so it was easy for him. Meanwhile, I am struggling to help this woman with her seatbelt, as she kept insisting, because she was flapping her hands all around it, interfering. All the while saying something about, "I can do this, I just need you to help me, but I can still do this myself." Not sure how that was supposed to work. Anyway, I didn't want to yell at her because she was obviously not well, and I was starting to worry that she was a danger to herself and anyone that might sit next to her. My son and the pilot then come up behind me, and the pilot thanks me, but asks that I sit back in my seat and he will help. A flight attendant is not far behind him. I settle my son and myself into our seats, and everyone keeps boarding while the pair tries to deal with this woman, hereby known as Karen, for reasons that will soon become apparent. The pilot asks Karen if she needs medical help, a doctor or ambulance. She insists she does not, and starts batting him away, loudly exclaiming, but not quite yelling yet, that she is fine and only needs help with the seatbelt. That her, quote, medication has made her a bit tired is all. Pilot notices the same things I did, but also more, and insists that an ambulance be called. The flight attendant goes to do this, and Karen gets even louder, insisting that she has to stay on this plane in flight because she needs to get back to City X by set time and can't be late. She keeps getting more and more belligerent when co-pilot comes to see if the pilot needs help. This is where things get interesting. The co-pilot takes one look at Karen, pulls the pilot away, and whispers something in the pilot's ear. The pilot looks confused and has yet another flight attendant stay with Karen while he and the co-pilot go to the front of the plane. We were all in coach. By this time, the plane has been fully boarded and we are closing in on the time for us to take off, but no sign of being anywhere near ready. The boarding door is still wide open, and all we can do is wait, with the flight attendant staying in the general vicinity in case Karen throws another fit. As is, she is loudly complaining that the staff need to get their acts together and get the plane flying, and that we, my son and I, shouldn't have gotten them or we'd be in the air already. And so this delay is obviously our fault. And then she briefly passes out before jerking back awake. It took a good 15 to 20 minutes or more of this for airport security to come in with a wheelchair to take her off the plane. And oh boy, she was not happy. She started trying to hit security, grab seats, and keep herself from being deplaned, something that in her state she was unable to do. It took about another couple of minutes to get her the otherwise 30-second walk from our seats to the boarding door and off the plane. Only after that could the flight staff start actual preparations to get us off the ground. All in all, we were running 50 minutes late by the end of this. I do not know what happened to her after this, but thanks to the co-pilot and the nice, wonderful flight attendant that had been there from the get-go, I did get to find out the events that had transpired before this. The flight attendant told me because we had asked her if Karen was okay, and my son was blaming himself for the delay and what happened. The flight attendant looked at us with sympathy and explained that no, it was not my son's fault and that it was a good thing he had grabbed the pilot. Apparently, the co-pilot had seen Karen a couple of hours before the flight in an airport bar. She had been very capable of walking and talking on her own, and was a businesswoman that flew regularly. She was not handicapped nor disabled, but was actually drunk. She had spent the 2 hours before the flight getting drunk at the bar, and the medicine she had taken was allergy meds and Tylenol, things that don't necessarily go well with alcohol. The co-pilot had been in the bar to grab some food and soda between flights as he rested. That is how he knew she was completely healthy without prior need for a wheelchair, and that she had been actively downing one drink after another and what meds she had taken, because he had thought to himself at the time, apparently, that it was stupid of her to do so. When she left the bar before he did, she immediately went to a nearby wheelchair, sat down in it, and then yelled at a passing staff member to take her to her gate, because she was, quote, incapable of walking and had been abandoned by another staff member. The co-pilot was apparently tired and just figured not his problem, so let it be, until he saw her on the flight, and that was when he pulled the pilot away. I could only look at this woman in awe, and my son just looked horrified. Luckily, we had just enough cushion time between flight transfers at the next airport that we just made it to the gate before boarding started. Had it been much longer, we would have missed our connecting flight. But I have always wondered how many people on that plane were not so lucky and did miss their connecting flights, because Karen thought it would be a good idea to get hammered and mix alcohol and over-the-counter medicine before a flight that she absolutely needed to be on. Alright, that's it for today's episode. Thank you for watching, I appreciate it. If you enjoyed, drop a like. And also, if you haven't yet, subscribe to the channel for more Reddit shenanigans. So take care, guys. Have an awesome day, and I'll see you in the next one.